This is Holly Millian, the founder and executive director of Artists United. Welcome to Artists United Television, the weekly show that brings you interviews and information from members of the Artists United worldwide artist community of 32,000 people. We like to feature different voices from the artist community, and today we have Karl Frisby, who's been on the show before. He's always got good information to share from his vantage point in Artists United Europe. Artists United is a worldwide movement and nonprofit organization to unite artists in all artistic disciplines. We have musicians, painters, dancers, filmmakers, animators, artists of all kinds involved with our organization. And we are coming together to empower individual artists to create excellent art and to unite all artists to create social change. We have programs that help to elevate the economic well-being of artists. We have a network that helps artists connect with opportunities. Primarily, this is through connecting artists to each other. We have had many documented examples in our first 2 years of operation of artists who have been hired for jobs, paying gigs, opportunities to perform and exhibit that were paid. We also have examples of artists coming together to advocate for policies that will enhance the economic well-being of artists, whether that is local, municipal government regulations having to do with how artists run their businesses, or whether they have access to safe, affordable housing, which impacts their bottom line. And also the entire network of Artists United is aimed at creating a place where artists can come together to advocate collectively for better policies for artists on national level and an international level. So today, Karl's going to be talking about basic income, and I'll give you a little intro to Karl. He's been on the show before, and we love having him on here. He's gone full Jesus on us today, he said, with his hair down. We missed this earlier. We were talking, and the lights behind him, I was beginning to believe it was full Jesus. So, Karl, one thing I do want to ask people to do before we get too deep is to check out our website at artistsunited.net. That's artistpluralunited.net. You can find out more about our programs. We're building an online platform right now that will enable artists within our network to connect with each other, to share resources and tools, to communicate, to collaborate, and to harness the power of a worldwide movement of artists. So please visit artistsunited.net. So without further ado, welcome, Karl.
Hello. Hi, Holly. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I always love seeing you there because it's beautiful peach color in the tent. Where are you exactly?
Nice and shiny. I'm just outside of Brussels and not too far away. So yeah, and it's a pretty beautiful weather. We've had an unseasonal summer, like it's just been crazy. We've had a Californian summer, not a Belgian summer. So it's just been amazing. And you can see we still got some of it.
I know, the light is incredible. I love the color. I have my plum walls behind me in the jazz wall, as you've referred to it now before.
The jazz wall.
I got the jazz wall. So this is
we're a fruit shop here.
We are kind of a fruit shop. We are.
Nutty as a fruitcake, we say in the UK. I don't know if you have that expression in.
Yes, we borrow most of our expressions from you, so that's correct. We have that as well. So
cool. Why is it not nutty as a nut cake? Anyway.
I don't know, or fruity as a nut cake? I mean...
fruity as a fruit cake makes sense. I'm fruity as a fruit cake. Right.
So what inspired you to let your hair down today?
It happens from time to time, you know, when I'm feeling in a utopic mood, it just will come down and...
You're in a utopic mood?
Yeah, well, universal basic income, you know, I think it's one of these utopia subjects. It's something that... is a visionary, hopeful, futurist kind of thing, and so yeah, it's something exciting to talk about, particularly as it relates to artists, and picking up on our discussion of the last time I was on the show talking about higher education, and I think we ended up saying that one of the issues of art higher education is that there's kind of no safety net when people finish, and I think that's why we've ended up where we are today talking about universal income.
There certainly is no safety net for students coming out of art school or almost any college. And in my opinion, when in most of our art schools, at least in the United States, we're not teaching practical information about how to earn a living from art, or how to protect yourself with the structures that any business would have, contracts, or for, I know from film school, my knowledge of film school, they're not teaching about how to raise money for films or the business end of things.
No.
So this idea of basic universal income, it's one that I've heard of. I think that it would be good for the viewers to know a little bit more. Can you explain what that basically means?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, it's kind of considered to be to some extent a utopian ideal, and it's kind of weird that I should be here in Belgium, just outside of Leuven, and in the university here in Leuven was actually the place where Thomas More wrote Utopia. And one of the concepts, one of the things that happens in Utopia is that there is a universal basic income. I think it was one of the first places where it was actually proposed. So, this is an idea that goes back to the very origins of capitalism. It's not a recent response to the kind of neoliberalism that we see now. It's an idea that has its origins, in the roots of capitalism, going right far back as Thomas More. So, I mean, fundamentally, it's the idea that every member of society should receive some dividend of the profit of that society, unconditionally, regardless of their social status, wealth. So the first thing to say is it's not a welfare system. It's not a system in which it's provided to you as a means of preventing poverty, although that's been the case in some countries where it's been piloted. It's been piloted with the poorest people. But fundamentally, universal basic income means that everybody is unconditionally granted a dividend of society's profits. And you can do what you like with it, fundamentally. That's the other thing. There's no caveat on how you should spend it. So, as I said, it was considered by Thomas More to be part of what would be required in a utopia. Fundamentally, because, wealth and money equals access. If you want to experience a parachute jump, you either have to be very handy with
have a very tall building,
a needle and thread and a mountain, or you need money. So you want to learn to play the guitar, well, you better be really good at woodwork or have money. So this is kind of the issue, that money gives an access ticket, and as such, universal basic income gives us freedom to do things, but at the same time it gives us freedom from freedom from having to work to feed ourselves, to feed our family, to have a shelter. So if you're talking about sort of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and at the very bottom we've got these very elemental needs, the idea is that if they're fulfilled, you get a certain amount of freedom. So that's really where More was coming from. And it kind of stayed within a little bit, I mean, at least to my knowledge, maybe because my first language is English. So, Bertrand Russell, the great British philosopher, was kind of the next person, I think, to really pick it up in a substantial way. So, and then very recently, it's become something that's associated with automation within society. So, as we see, increasing numbers of jobs being taken by machines and automated responses, we're starting to think, well, what are these people going to do with their time? How are we going to cope with this? So again, it's been proposed as a, and I know that some Zuckerberg and Elon Musk and these kind of people are great proponents of it from that side of things, as a way of helping people deal with their lives being substantially changed and communities being changed by automation. So yeah, that's pretty much what it is.
Wow, that's a phenomenal concept. I knew a little bit about it, but I don't understand completely how it would be implemented. You said there are countries in the world now that have been experimenting with it. Could you give some examples?
Yeah, I mean, there's been several trials. In Brazil, you'll have to forgive me, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but there's been a pilot of basic income among the poorest parts of society. And a similar thing happened, I think, in South Africa or Namibia. There was a pilot so that the poorest people, would have an unconditional income. So, the really important difference between that and a welfare state is it's unconditional. You're not required to be looking for a job. You're not required to be updating you're not required to do anything. You get the money regardless. And then at the other end of the scale, there have been pilots in, what are called more developed countries. So Canada attempted a pilot. Finland had pilots. And there's something very similar to universal basic income that happens already in Alaska and has happened like that for a long time, simply because of the nature of the land there and the way people live, and the fact that, it's still in many ways regarded as a kind of First Nations country. And so there's a kind of
there's an acknowledgement, of the past and the history. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. But what's perhaps more interesting, let's say, are the ones that are not a response to poverty. So the ones that are, trying to look at the concept of freedom and trying to look at the concept of happier lives for everyday people. And there was a fairly major study in Germany 5 or so years ago, and they concluded that it was unworkable and should sort of be thrown out, and it's just not something that.
What was the problem?
Well, this is the interesting thing. Quite strange responses. I mean, one of the biggest issues is that they felt it would demotivate society and that nobody would bother working or doing anything.
Nobody.
Yeah. Or just enough people to seriously destabilize the economy, which makes you think there must be a lot of people doing crap jobs in Germany.
I was going to say, what are they all doing? Are those jobs really that necessary? Truly.
So there was that. And then I think there was also a fear that it would fuel alcoholism and drug abuse and lots of quite random stuff. And then on the other side of things, I think there was a kind of worry that just the cost of implementing it, the cost of making that change would be enormous. But nearly always when it's been proposed, it's been proposed as a replacement to existing. So it's not been proposed as something happening in parallel. And so in order for that to work, countries have realized that the universal basic income would have to be quite high because it would have to replace welfare, Medicare, housing support. It would actually have to be quite high in order. But to me, I don't see why the two things can't exist in parallel.
Totally agree.
So, and another thing for me that I think is missing from the picture almost everywhere I've come across it is whenever you have a major cultural change like this, and in my opinion, a change like that, say in the United States, if that were to happen in America, would be such a cultural change. I mean, it would essentially be the successor to capitalism, right? I mean, it would change everything. There has to be some mechanism of education that supports that. You can't just be like, tomorrow everybody gets $14,000 a year, or whatever it would be. There has to be some education, and that's never been proposed as far as I can see, and that's never been something that's tied to it.
Well, there's reasons that it's never been proposed, and one of the reactions that I have to what you're saying is there are certainly going to be people, especially in the United States, who are going to hate this idea with a passion and do everything in their power to fight against it, because in America there's a trend toward believing that somebody else is getting over. That's the phrase. There's somebody who's getting a free handout, or somebody who is not working, and that they're a drag on the economy. Right. So I do not know how we would implement that here, although I have heard that I believe it's San Francisco has been exploring a basic minimum income for the poorest people in the city, giving them basically like a stipend of $14,000 a year, just so they have something like a supplement for their housing more than anything else, because housing is so very expensive in the San Francisco and the San Francisco Bay Area. So
Sure.
I do know of some of those efforts to try to integrate this into the current systems, but what it sounds like is you're saying in Germany they didn't give it very much time.
I think it was more of a case of that there was very little research done into the sort of sociological and the kind of emotional impact of it, let's even say. It was very much done from an economic or political standpoint. And I think that's one of the things that artists have to contribute in great strength, that we can help with that argument of understanding emotionally and sociologically what things can mean, and help to shape it and help to educate people in a way that's not a traditional didactic schooling, but help people to get comfortable with the idea. Because I mean, here in Europe, there's this idea of what you might call sort of working class pride. It's like, I worked my whole life off. I can't even stand up because my back's broken. My hands are like, but I was happy. I was happy with it all. And the second you suggest that somebody might get something for free, well, sponger, the scrounger, you're going to get a situation. And ironically enough, that you find, and certainly we see this with the rise of populism, the people most opposed to these progressive ideas are actually not the wealthiest people. They're the sort of poorest working people. It's kind of quite ironic. There's been studies to show that, for example, bizarrely enough, the people most opposed to immigration are first-generation immigrants. It's quite strange,
It's the scarcity mindset, honestly. Obviously, it's that the idea that there's a limited quota, a limited amount, and that if I got mine, it means I have to grab onto it, hold onto it, and prevent others from taking any of it. So
yeah. And also, I think to give value to your, I was going to say meaningless work, but that'd be a bit cruel. But value to the work that you did not enjoy or do not enjoy doing. So you sit there and say, I spent my whole life, in a factory or whatever, and I'm afraid to admit that perhaps I would have rather been doing something else. So therefore, I can't allow somebody else the possibility to refuse that. There's a lot of dynamics, I think, in place. But in terms of artists, I mean, to bring the discussion back there, I mean, something we're trying to advocate for here as part of Artists United, and specifically some discussions we've been having with artists here in Belgium, is the notion that perhaps artists should be entitled to some kind of universal basic income. And by which we mean perhaps in the first instance, a reorientation of the benefits of the welfare system, so that instead of it being conditional on you looking for and finding any work, like regardless of what it is, sweeping streets, whatever, that you receive the same money, but unconditionally, based on the fact that you are an active practicing artist and that you are doing something valuable for society and with your life that does not necessarily result in financial return. Because I have friends, I think we all have friends who've been in this position that are on welfare, making really important artwork, doing really incredible things that doesn't really turn around any money. And they go to the welfare office, and their livelihood is removed because that week they weren't looking for a job at Kmart or whatever, So we need to have this situation in which there's a recognition for the artistic lifestyle as something that society benefits from supporting.
So you could put down on your paperwork the occupation artist, and it would be recognized as a career, as a legitimate field and a legitimate occupation. So you could be acknowledged for the work that you're doing. I could very easily see this being a wonderful program where through our community democratic agreement and with our government support, we could pay artists for their art, and then that art becomes publicly owned. So if painters are painting, we pay them for canvases that they've done that then are displayed in our public libraries or put in.
This is an interesting thing. There was a pilot of something like this in the Netherlands, where they committed to buy any artworks that you produced, and this was the way that you would be funded. There's an enormous problem with this in so much as it goes back to, the pre-Christian Greek philosophers, that we've still not, and probably never will, resolve the idea of what is quality. When is something sufficiently good enough to be called art? And when is it somebody went, I need 50 euros from the state? And yeah,
here's my painting. Yeah.
or not even that. I call this one blank canvas. So
okay, there's people going to game the system no matter what.
And that's what happened in the Netherlands. Unfortunately, it actually, artists were complaining about each other. All I do is see this guy in the pub, and he's not trying. So there's a kind of an issue in which it's something we have to overcome, and it's somewhere where we're going to have to meet governments halfway, because it's going to be very difficult to say anyone who self-declares is essentially off the normal register and onto the artist register. So at least in the short term, we're kind of proposing that anyone who's engaged either in any education or active work with others. I mean, it doesn't have to have been paid, but they've had an exhibition.
There's a track record, an effort to be an artist and to make art. Yeah.
And I think education is a fairly fundamental thing here anyway, not necessarily in the States. I think in the States, it would be a real barrier because it's so expensive to go to higher education. Whereas here, it's like $300 a year. So if you really wanted to be a painter or a filmmaker, really, what would stop you from going to university and studying that? There's nothing that would stop you other than desire. So, I mean, here it could work that you could say, if you pursued this as an educational path, we will accept your status. But I think, again, in the States, that would be a much more problematic thing because the cost of higher education is so extreme that, of course, there could be many people who are put off the idea of studying sculpture because they can, $70,000 later, they can't find a job. And it's a different kind of deal altogether. But I think globally, as Artists United, we're going to have to adapt on a country by country basis, but the solutions that we come up with will help each other and offer support.
I love how you've just said that, and I love that. I think that the solution, Karl, is really that the solution should be coming from the artists themselves, right? Yeah. And we would know better than anyone what would be necessary or helpful to us to enable us to do our best work and to contribute to society and also take care of our basic needs. Because I think that's the essence of the basic guaranteed income, the basic minimum income, is that we're talking about just covering things that most of us take for granted: housing, some kind of shelter, food, healthcare, those sorts of education, basic things that are needed. So I think that the movement needs to embrace this, and the solutions need to come from the artists themselves as a collective. And it would have to be adapted country to country because the needs would be very different. Sure. But what are you, so you are seeing this happening in Belgium now? Is this a part of the movement of the moment?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an active discussion. There's no doubt about it. I mean, there are other attempts to solve it in other ways, and there are things that happen in Belgium that are very, very positive. There is actually, for example, an artist housing program here that if you're an artist, certain property developers allow you to live in their property for the first 6 months after it's been completed or something to this effect. And the government subsidizes that. So that's great. So, I mean, I know friends that have got apartments right in the center of town that they're paying almost nothing for.
So it's like subsidized squatting? Is that what you're saying?
It is exactly that. It is exactly that. So, yes, there are really progressive things going on here. But again, they're not things that are necessarily scalable. I mean, here I'm in a country of 1.3 million people. Per capita, it's one of the wealthiest nations in the world. It doesn't really have substantial social problems here. There's not any issue whatsoever with crime or, it's in many ways
A
so
utopia?
well. Definitely not that, but it's very functional. It's not hemorrhaging money in the way that much bigger countries are. With more complex issues. Still, life's pretty simple here. It's like a sort of tiny Montana or something.
Tiny Montana without the mountains, of course. So
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
flatter Montana.
Literally a flat, tiny Montana. I should work
Flatana.
for the Flatana, Sultana.
Call it
I should
Flatana, yeah.
I should work for the Belgian Tourist Board. Come here, it's like a tiny flat Montana.
I know you're a copywriter also by training
Yes, I am.
and your skill set. So right, it was shining out right there. That was
There
brilliant,
we go.
brilliant copy. So we're about to come to the end of the interview for today, but I just feel like we're just scratching the surface. There's so much more that we could cover. We didn't even get
Mm,
into some of the other efforts that are underway just to address some of the economic imbalances, like in the United
sure.
States. We have in the San Francisco Bay Area, both in Oakland and in San Francisco, there were ballot initiatives to increase the minimum wage. There's a federal minimum wage in the United States and a state minimum wage, state by state.
Right.
But in the Bay Area, in San Francisco and in Oakland, there were ballot initiatives over the last few years to increase the minimum wage. So they added
Mm,
that it's now $15 an hour. The federal minimum wage is something like, I'm sorry, my facts completely narrowed out, but about $8.50 an hour. So if you can see the difference if you can go from that to
wow.
$15 an hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in
Yeah.
San Francisco, there's even a surcharge on restaurant tabs for health insurance for restaurant workers.
Okay.
And as you know, restaurant workers are frequently artists who work in the
Indeed.
restaurant as their day job or night
Sure.
job or whatever it is. So there's very creative things underway. We'll be able to see what the impact is of that. There are people that are complaining bitterly about it. But
Mm, mm.
so is there anything maybe you would like to conclude with? Anything you would direct people to see, read, look at, or consider as they come out of this and look for more?
I mean, I would kind of make a shout out, I guess, to any artists that um, are sort of officially out of work, and it'd be really great to hear from people about what their experiences are like in terms of when they go to get the sort of basic income that they receive, assuming they're in a country that they do get any kind of basic income. But I'd be really curious to get a global picture of how it is for artists to be out of work, officially out of work. What does that mean for them on a daily basis? How does it impact their self-esteem? How does it make them feel? And it would be really great if we could sort of just get a picture of that. And I'd be really happy, to hear from anyone about that, through Artists United, and perhaps if we get enough of those responses, I can synthesize it and we can do another episode, and I can let you know what we've heard
Well,
from around the world.
I have a counter proposal to you, Carl, which is I love that so much that I think what we should do is a survey of our membership. Put the
Okay.
survey out to ask these questions of them and see what information we can get. The more that we know, the better
Yeah.
that we can help. But I also want to add that one of the benefits of being part of Artists United is that you are not a single artist out alone looking for a way to survive and make your way in the world, but you become part of a collective network, a very large network. And with the platform that we're developing now, we have a prototype of that, which we'll be testing. It'll be rolled out at the end of the year. We hope that would enable all members of Artists United to connect with each other. And what we've seen so far is that we have hundreds of examples of artists helping artists, including finding paid work, finding
Right.
housing, finding experts that can assist them, finding attorneys for their legal needs, finding psychotherapists for their mental health needs, finding
Great. Wow.
you name it. We it's the collective power, and when we put all of us together, we really have everything that we need
Sure.
to
Sure.
succeed. So in a
This is
way,
true.
Artists United is the utopia that you are
It is, yeah,
sketching out.
absolutely, absolutely, and it could well be. I think we can contribute that missing part of the puzzle to society, I think. And as I said about that German research, it did not have the creative element. It did not look at universal basic income from what it means as a human being. And I think that's something that we can give, as a community to the wider world, this perspective of what things mean creatively, what things mean as a human being. And I think until that third part of the picture's in there, it's going to be really difficult.
It will, but that's why we're here, and it's so wonderful to have your participation, Karl. You bring so much brilliance and great ideas. I would like to mention to the audience that I'd forgotten to mention that Karl is the director of Artists United Europe. As our seed is planted and we're growing the connections in Europe, there are multiple chapters of Artists United in Europe. In fact, we have 25 chapters worldwide outside of the United States. In many cases, it's just an individual artist who has seen the power of the vision of what we want to create and who's agreed to help build the network. So, Karl, you were in very early representing Belgium, but of course you were born in the United Kingdom, so you have those connections. And you've been doing so much to connect all of our European chapter representatives to each other. You had organized a brilliant conference call. We had at least 9 people on that talking. When I saw that, and I saw how we had people in from everywhere from Turkey to the Netherlands, Belgium, the United Kingdom, Germany, other places, all on that call
Spain,
together. Spain. It's a sign of hope, and what we are doing is just starting to create the organization. It's only 2 years old. We just received our nonprofit status in the United States. Karl has been active in helping us to form a European entity to help us with our work in Europe. So the future's looking very bright. There's a lot of work ahead of us, but I have always believed that when you unite artists, anything is possible. And so I want to welcome everyone who's watching this show to please visit artistsunited.net. That's artists, plural, united.net. If you sign up on our web form, on our email list, you'll become an automatic free member of Artists United. You'll receive information on a monthly basis. You'll be invited to artist networking events that we host worldwide to help meet other artists that can assist you with connections and information and maybe even job opportunities. And we also are doing online educational work through this show and other means. And there's so much more to come. So please do visit artistsunited.net. If you want to be involved, if you'd like to be on the show, just email me. And if you'd like to answer the questions that Karl has raised here on the show and want to give input, you can email me at holly@artistsunited.net. That's HOLLY @artists_united.net. Karl, it's always a pleasure. And I loved seeing your hair down today. I love you in full Jesus mode. Please let
I've got sandals on as well, but I'm not going to show you.
You're not going to show me the sandals.
No.
All hail. I knew you were coming back. It was only a matter of time, but here you are on the show, and we'll look forward to having you again here next time. I think a sneak preview for those who are curious, Karl will be talking about his trip to Indianapolis, or as it's better known, Russia.
Yeah, that's right, Indianapolis.
We were referring to it as Indianapolis for a time because he was undercover, so he couldn't reveal where he was. So anyway, the joke continues. We love Indianapolis.
The 500.
The 500. All right, Karl.
Take care. Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Bye-bye.
Have a good day.
From the north